My name is Ellie, and the night my apartment filled with a sharp, chemical stench, I thought my father would come rushing over to help. Instead, he told me they were at the movies with my sister Kelsey and didn't want to be disturbed. After that, something so terrible happened that night that I couldn't tell you this story anymore. Before we dive in, let me know, where are you watching this from? Drop it in the comments. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, this story might hit close to home. I smelled it first, bitter, metallic, like burnt plastic and ammonia got into a fight. It was nearly midnight, and I was alone in my second-floor apartment just outside of Eugene, Oregon, curled up with a blanket and my laptop. The rain had started an hour earlier, soft at first, then harsher, now pounding against the window with growing urgency. But the smell, that wasn't rain. That was something else. I got up slowly, heart beginning to race, and checked the kitchen. Nothing was on. No candles, no stove burners, no heater. I walked down the short hallway to the laundry closet. The dryer was off, silent. The smell seemed to be coming from the walls, or the vents. It was getting stronger. My head started to ache. My throat tightened. I grabbed my phone and dialed the one person I still hoped might show up when I really needed him. Dad? My voice cracked. There's a weird smell in my apartment. It's really strong, like chemicals. I think something's wrong. Could you come? We're at the movies with Kelsey, he cut in, voice casual. Can't this wait? Wait? It smells toxic, Dad. I'm getting dizzy. My voice rose with panic. Please, I think I might need help, Ellie. Not everything's a crisis. You always overreact, he sighed. I heard popcorn crunching. A faint laugh in the background, Kelsey's. Just open a window. We're not leaving in the middle of the film. And then he hung up. I stared at the screen. The call ended. That was it. It shouldn't have surprised me. It wasn't the first time he'd picked Kelsey over me. But something about that moment, the casual dismissal, the sheer indifference while I stood there, breath catching in my chest, made something inside me go silent. I opened all the windows. The rain blew in sideways, soaking the carpet. The smell didn't fade. It thickened. My chest felt tight. I sat on the edge of the couch, trying not to panic, trying to believe maybe I was overreacting. But the smell kept clawing up my throat. I tried calling the gas company, but I couldn't even explain what I was smelling. And all the while, the storm outside howled louder, lashing the windows like it knew I was alone. I wrapped myself in my coat and sat by the open balcony door, hoping the cold air might help. My head throbbed. My lungs burned. I tried to focus on anything other than the echo of my father's voice. We're at the movies with Kelsey. Not, are you safe? Not, I'll be right there. Just, Kelsey. The golden child. The porcelain girl. The daughter they planned their lives around. I was the afterthought. The background support beam, only noticed when I cracked. I leaned against the doorframe, letting the rain hit my cheeks. Somewhere deep in my gut, I knew something was wrong. But I was too tired to fight anymore. Too tired to argue with my father's disinterest or my own body's warning signs. The storm raged louder. My limbs felt heavy. I texted Kelsey. Something's wrong in my apartment. Just wanted you to know. No reply. And then I don't remember anything else. When I opened my eyes, I was still in my apartment or maybe in some in-between space that looked like it. The rain hadn't stopped, but the storm's tantrum had quieted, now reduced to a rhythmic tapping on the glass, like fingers drumming. The air was still heavy, suffocating. The chemical stench had dulled, but it lingered like the memory of something rotten just out of sight. I was on the floor. How had I gotten there? I crawled back toward the couch and pulled myself up slowly, my limbs sluggish, my head swimming. I pressed my forehead to the cold window pane and tried to breathe through my mouth. Every inhale was thick and metallic, like the air had been scraped across rusted metal. My phone buzzed once, and I jumped. But it wasn't a reply from my father or Kelsey. Just a spam text from a gym I hadn't been to in 2 years. I nearly laughed. Nearly. I didn't try to call again. What was the point? Instead, I curled up on my couch, blanket pulled to my chin, and stared at the red glow of the digital clock across the room. 12:17 a.m. The numbers blinked in silence, and I thought about every other time I'd stared into the dark, wishing someone would show up for me. Growing up, I was the easy one. That's what my mom used to say at the dinner table, ruffling Kelsey's hair while handing me the dishes to wash. "Ellie's so low maintenance," she'd sigh. "Kelsey just needs a little more attention. She's sensitive. Porcelain." That's what they called her when she cried at age 6, because someone bumped her at a birthday party. "She's like porcelain," Dad had said, lifting her into his arms like a wounded dove. "You have to be careful with her." What was I? Plaster? Reinforcement beams? Leftover nails they used when Kelsey's frame needed tightening? I was the fixer. The quiet helper. The one they leaned on but never saw. When Kelsey broke her leg in high school and had to miss prom, I canceled my study retreat to help her get ready for a makeshift party my parents threw in the backyard. I decorated the whole thing while Mom and Dad fussed over her makeup. When Kelsey got dumped by her college boyfriend and dropped out for a semester, I mailed her care packages every week. I don't think she ever said thank you. But I kept doing it. Because family, right? I'd convinced myself for years that being invisible meant I was strong. That being forgotten was noble, somehow. But tonight the silence felt sharp. It wasn't just about the smell or the fear. It was the deep, aching loneliness of knowing I could be in danger, was in danger, and my family still couldn't be bothered to care. My thoughts spiraled like a whirlpool, pulling me deeper. Would they even notice if something happened to me? Would anyone? The room felt smaller, the air tighter. I tried to distract myself, shifting mental gears, forcing my mind to go anywhere else. But the memories pressed in. Like the time I won a middle school writing competition and came home glowing, only to find the family already celebrating Kelsey's acceptance into a teen modeling camp. "We'll read your story later," Dad had said, waving me off as he poured sparkling cider into flutes. They never did. Or when I got my first job and used the paycheck to buy groceries because the fridge was empty, but Kelsey still got a new winter coat the same week because she hated last year's color. Invisible effort. Silent sacrifice. Was it ever going to be enough? The scent in the apartment twisted again, thick and nauseating. I stood up too fast and had to brace myself against the wall. Something in my head was throbbing. A steady, low thump like footsteps on the floor above, but there were no upstairs neighbors. I wasn't sure if the sound was real or inside my skull. I moved to the bathroom, turned on the fan, and splashed water on my face. My reflection startled me, pale, eyes wide and rimmed with red. I looked like a ghost haunting my own apartment. I went back to the living room, sat on the couch, pulled the blanket tighter. 1:04 a.m. The blinking clock mocked me. No one was coming. No one was calling back. No one was worried. For a second, I thought about texting Kelsey again. Just something, maybe guilt would finally crack her. But I didn't. Not because I didn't want to. Because I already knew the answer. If she answered, it'd be performative. If she didn't, it would hurt more than I could bear. I stared at the ceiling. The walls felt like they were breathing, the stench seeping out from the paint itself. Every breath came harder now. My limbs wouldn't stop trembling. Sleep tugged at me like a slow, heavy hand pulling me under. I resisted at first. But then, what was the point? The last thought I had before everything faded was absurdly quiet. What if I don't wake up, and no one even notices? It was the light that woke me, too bright, too sharp, stabbing through my eyelids like glass. Cold air hissed against my face, and I felt something tight strapped across my chest. I tried to turn my head, but it wouldn't move. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Where was I? A slow, muffled voice reached me through the hum of machinery. "She's coming to." Someone's hand gripped mine, but it didn't feel familiar. Latex glove. Professional. Not family. I opened my eyes fully this time, and all I saw was white, ceiling lights, a plastic oxygen mask, metal above me. A face leaned into view, blurry at first. A man in navy blue with a patch on his chest. Paramedic. His lips were moving. "Ellie? Can you hear me? You're in an ambulance. There was a fire in your building." A fire? My brain couldn't catch up. Fire? But I was just on the couch. Under the blanket. The chemical smell. The dizziness. The silence. I blinked fast, heart hammering in my throat. I tried to move my legs, pain shot through my side. The paramedic noticed and adjusted something on the four-pole. Easy. You've got some burns on your back and legs. Minor smoke inhalation. We're giving you oxygen now. You're stable, but you've been unconscious for a while. How long? I tried to ask, but the mask muffled everything. My lips moved. He leaned closer. Don't try to talk yet. You're safe. We're taking you to Sacred Valley General. Safe. Was I? My mind scrambled to process what had happened, but it was like trying to hold water in a fist. I'd fallen asleep in a toxic-smelling apartment, and now I was in an ambulance. Somewhere between sleep and fire, I had lost everything in the middle. The ceiling passed above me in jerky, bouncing movements. Someone held my wrist, checking a pulse. I turned my head and saw the outline of my burnt sweater sleeve, blackened and torn. Smoke curled off it faintly. Then a word came to me through the fog, family. My chest tightened. Not from the smoke. Where were they? Had my dad come when he realized I wasn't answering? Had Kelsey checked in after my text? The paramedic was talking into a radio. Female, mid-20s, moderate burns, carbon monoxide exposure, found unconscious. He didn't say reported missing. He didn't say family on scene. Because no one had come. They hadn't even called. Maybe the neighbors smelled the smoke. Maybe someone heard the fire alarm. But not my father. Not my sister. I closed my eyes and let that fact settle in like a stone. They were at the movies. Probably went out for dinner after. Maybe ice cream. While I lay unconscious in an apartment filling with gas or worse. I was a ghost to them already. The next few minutes blurred. Sirens. Brakes. A gurney being pulled from the back. Cold air against burned skin. Someone shouting codes. Hallways. Lights. The burn of antiseptic in the back of my throat. But no familiar voices. No, we're here, Ellie. No, oh my God, what happened? Not even an awkward, are you okay? Just strangers. Gloves. Machines. A sea of blank faces doing their jobs. And for the first time since childhood, I didn't even try to hope they'd show up. Because I knew. If someone loves you, they come when you're burning. They don't watch the credits. They put me in the burn unit. At first, I thought it was temporary, somewhere to stabilize, to get cleaned up, and then I'd be discharged back to my life. But after the second surgery, when I woke up wrapped like a mummy, stitched and taped and braced, I realized this wasn't going to be a quick stop. The pain was an animal. Sometimes snarling, sometimes sleeping, but always there, curled in my limbs. They gave me morphine, but even that didn't drown out the ache fully. It just made time feel unreal, like I was drifting through someone else's life. Someone broken. Someone invisible. Bandages wrapped my hands like boxing gloves, and my right leg was in traction. The skin on my lower back charred. My hair had been cut short, most of it burned or tangled beyond saving. What was left smelled faintly of ash. But somehow, in all that silence and numbness, my mind stayed clear. I knew what had happened. The chemical smell hadn't been paranoia. The dizziness hadn't been an overreaction. The fire hadn't been a metaphor. It had been real. And I had survived it alone. 3 days passed before I could sit up without retching. 5 days before I could whisper a word. That was the morning I asked the nurse. Her name was Daphne, soft-spoken, early 40s with crow's feet that looked like kindness, if I could use a phone. Of course, she said gently, helping me hold it with her own hands since mine were still bandaged tight. Want me to dial someone for you? My dad, I croaked, barely audible. She gave me a sad smile. Let's try him. The ringtone went on for what felt like an hour. Then his voice. Hello. He sounded distracted. Loud music in the background. Dad, it's Ellie. Silence. Ellie, he said, as if trying to place the name. I'm in the hospital. I heard a pause. A clink of silverware. Laughter. Oh, right. We heard there was a fire. You okay? I blinked hard. No. I'm not okay. I expected urgency. Concern. Shock. Something. But his tone barely changed. I'm so sorry, honey. We've been meaning to come, but things have been hectic. Kelsey okay? I asked before I could stop myself. Oh yeah, she's fine. She's actually been helping us sort things with the new car lease. I let the silence do the talking. After a beat, he cleared his throat. We'll come soon. I promise. That word. Promise. It was like a paper umbrella in a hurricane. Okay, I whispered, though I didn't believe it. And I didn't ask why they hadn't come already. Why they hadn't called. Why they hadn't even checked the hospital registry. I thanked him. Hung up. And then I cried. Quietly, because crying hurt. Everything hurt. Even the air in my lungs. But something shifted after that call. Something final. Like a door closing softly behind me. The next day, a woman named Anna was wheeled into the room next to mine. Her arms were wrapped, her face partially bandaged, and she had the voice of someone who'd smoked for 30 years and seen it all. House fire, she said casually when we made eye contact through the curtain. Kitchen fryer. Dumb mistake. She winked. You. Gas leak, I managed. She nodded like we'd both just exchanged secret war stories. Over the next few days, we talked more. Anna told me about her grandkids. Her ex-husband. Her dog, Charlie, who she said probably set the fire trying to get into the trash. She laughed often. Loud, like she didn't care who was listening. You look like you got hit by a flamethrower, sweetheart, she said once. But your eyes? Still alive. That's something. On day 10, a young man named Curtis rolled in on a gurney. Motorcycle crash. Broken ribs, arm, pride. He had a dry sense of humor and snuck us ginger ale cans when the nurses weren't looking. The room filled with jokes, groans, and stories. Real ones. Ugly, hilarious, healing ones. We were a strange little tribe, held together by pain and proximity. But they saw me. They listened. They noticed when I cried in the middle of the night and said nothing, just turned on a soft playlist or hummed to the beat of their heart monitors. Daphne brought me a lavender-scented lotion one morning and gently rubbed it into the parts of my arms that weren't bandaged. Still no visitors? She asked. I shook my head. She didn't push. Just whispered, then we're your people now. And somehow, those 4 words healed more than the stitches ever could. They said I could skip it. Group therapy. No pressure, the social worker told me. Just an option. I almost said no. Not because I didn't want help, but because I didn't think my story was worth telling. I wasn't a soldier or a survivor of something epic. I was just a woman who stayed too long in a burning apartment because she'd been taught her pain wasn't urgent. But something about Anna's voice from the next bed, her laughter, her irreverence, the way she kept calling Curtis Hot Wheels nudged me forward. So one morning, I let them wheel me down the beige hallway and park me in a semicircle of chairs, most filled with people who looked stitched together, inside and out. A woman with skin grafts across her neck gave me a warm smile. A teenage boy with bandages on both hands nodded. I nodded back. The therapist's name was Marla. Maybe in her late 50s. Gray hair tied back, eyes like they'd seen everything and still cared. We don't have to say anything, she said gently. But if something wants out, let it. Everyone shared in waves, little pieces of themselves. Some told stories about what happened. Others didn't. Some just cried. No one rushed them. I sat silent for the first 2 sessions. Just listened. Listened to how pain makes people poetic. How trauma strips you raw, but also makes you honest. Curtis talked about the night he crashed his bike and how the first person who showed up was a stranger who held his hand until the ambulance came. None of my family even knew I was hurt until the hospital called, he said. Guess they didn't notice I'd been gone for 24 hours. Heads nodded. Mine too. Marla glanced my way but didn't push. Then, on the 3rd day, I surprised myself. My name's Ellie, I said. Everyone turned quiet. I was in a fire too. Gas leak. I didn't call 911 because I didn't think it was serious. I called my dad instead. My throat closed. I thought I'd stop there, but I didn't. He told me they were at the movies with my sister. Said I always overreact. So I just opened a window and tried to ride it out. No one interrupted. My family didn't check on me. Not when I was in the ambulance. Not after the surgeries. I called them once from here. They said they'd come. Pause. Breathe. They never did. Still no interruption. Just quiet. Safe quiet. I've always been the easy one. The one who doesn't need much. My sister's the fragile one. The golden one. I was the background. The backup plan. The one who'd be fine no matter what. Curtis's voice broke the silence. I know that one, he said. My sister crashed her car and got a brand new one. I brought home straight A's and got asked to mow the lawn. A few people chuckled. Marla tilted her head. How long have you been holding that in? I blinked. Years. Maybe my whole life. No one looked uncomfortable. No one changed the subject. No one accused me of being ungrateful or dramatic. They just sat with it. And that silence, that stillness, it made room. Room for truth. Room for healing. For the first time, I didn't feel like a burden when I spoke. I felt seen. After the session, the woman with the graphs, her name was Joanne, wheeled closer. What your family did, she said softly. That's their shame, not yours. I nodded, unsure what to say. She leaned in a little. They don't deserve your guilt. That hit me hard. Guilt. I'd carried it like a second skin. Like every rejection was my fault. Every silence something I'd earned. That night, I sat by the window in my hospital room, watching the sky bruise into twilight. A nurse had left a small tray of tea and lemon cookies on my side table, Anna's favorite. I sipped it slowly, breathing in the warmth, and felt something return. Not hope exactly. Not yet. But something close. A thread of self-worth, pulled taut but not snapped. And this time, it had come not from apologies, but from the simple act of speaking and being heard. The discharge papers crinkled in my lap as Daphne wheeled me down the corridor. Sure you're ready for this? She asked. No. But I nodded anyway. She gave my hand a squeeze. You've got people here if it doesn't go the way you want. I knew what she meant. I'd called my parents the night before, voice steady. They're releasing me tomorrow. I'll need a ride. My mother had sounded surprised. Not concerned. Not relieved. Just inconvenienced. We'll come, she'd said. We'll take you out for dinner, too. Kelsey's picking the place. Kelsey. Of course. Now I sat just inside the sliding glass doors of the hospital, watching their silver SUV pull into the circular drive. My heart beat faster than it should have. Hope did that to you. It didn't care how many times you'd been dropped. It always got back up. The back door opened. My father stepped out first. Same beige windbreaker. Same distracted frown. Then my mother, brisk and efficient, waving off a nurse who tried to assist. I've got her, she said, like I was a carry-on bag. No hug. No, you look better. Just a glance, a quick once-over, as if gauging how much damage they'd have to explain to friends. Dad opened the passenger door for me. Careful now. It was more instruction than affection. The ride was short and mostly silent. Kelsey wasn't in the car. I didn't ask why. Where are we going? I finally asked. My mother cleared her throat. That little diner by the highway. The one you used to like. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager. Back when family dinners still meant something. Inside, the booths were lined with vinyl that squeaked every time someone shifted. The scent of burnt coffee and grease hung in the air. A jukebox blinked quietly in the corner. We were seated at a table by the window. I slid in awkwardly, my cane leaning beside me, the fresh tightness of my healing skin reminding me I wasn't who I'd been last time I sat here. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, smiled at me with something that felt like actual kindness. Glad you're out, hon. Heard about the fire. That one sentence meant more than anything my parents had said all day. Thank you, I said, voice thin but genuine. My mother pursed her lips. We ordered. Fried chicken for Dad. A Cobb salad for Mom, no dressing. A turkey melt for me, though I wasn't really hungry. The silence wasn't angry. It was something worse, polite. So my father said, stabbing a piece of fried okra. How's the leg? Still attached, I said flatly. He nodded, not catching the tone. My mother sipped her tea. You look thinner. I burned 12% of my body. It's a great weight loss plan. That got a pause. I didn't fill it. After a while, Dad cleared his throat. Well, you're out now. That's good. I looked between them. Why didn't you visit? Mom's fork stopped midair. We were going to. But then Kelsey had her portfolio show, and you know how important that was. You had 12 days, I interrupted. Dad shifted uncomfortably. You know how your mother gets around hospitals. I almost died. That landed. Briefly. Then Mom tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and looked away. You're always so dramatic, Ellie, she murmured. It's not like we didn't care. No, I said, setting down my fork. You just didn't show up. Silence again. Outside the window, the rain had started soft at first, like the beginning of a storm that knew how to wait. I hoped this would be different, I said quietly. This dinner. This moment. My father looked at me like I'd just spoken in a foreign language. My mother reached for the check, though the food was barely touched. We should get going, she said. You must be tired. I was tired. Tired of expecting them to be different. Tired of mistaking proximity for love. Tired of letting them set the terms. Outside, I paused at the edge of the sidewalk while my dad went to pull the car around. My mother stood next to me, arms crossed. You don't have to make everything a scene, she said under her breath. I'm not, I replied. I'm just noticing who you are. The car pulled up. I got in without another word. And for the rest of the ride home, I stared out the window, rain streaking the glass like falling truth. The house smelled the same as it always had: lavender and lemon floor cleaner, faint whiffs of perfume from the hallway diffuser. But it felt like a museum. Stiff. Unwelcoming. Like a place where no one was supposed to live, only pass through quietly. They'd made up the guest room, though I noticed it was just the pull-out couch in Dad's office, not the proper bedroom upstairs. Kelsey's space, I assumed, was still untouched. Sacred. Untouchable. I sat gingerly on the edge of the makeshift bed, Kane leaning against my thigh. The hum of the ceiling fan filled the silence as I tried not to feel the weight of being temporary. Dinner had been a blur of half-hearted conversation and Kelsey rattling off her latest graphic design gigs like she was on a podcast no one else had been invited to. Now we were back at the diner again. Not because I asked. Kelsey craved a milkshake, and that apparently became the evening's priority. My father had insisted I come along. Some fresh air will be good for you, he'd said, as if the ache in my body was merely a suggestion. So here I was. Back in the booth, watching condensation trail down a glass of water I hadn't touched. Across from me, Kelsey slurped loudly through her straw, scrolling on her phone with one manicured hand, a strawberry milkshake slowly disappearing in the other. I waited until our server left before I said it. Quietly. Almost too carefully. Would it be okay if I stayed a few more nights? Just until I'm steady enough to manage stairs again. The silence that followed was immediate and sharp. Kelsey didn't look up. Then she exhaled hard and slammed her milkshake onto the table. It splashed at the rim, pink drops hitting the salt shaker. Oh my God, Ellie. My stomach dropped. I knew this was coming, she said, finally setting her phone down. We just got things back to normal. Now you want to move in. I didn't say move in, I replied, startled by the venom in her tone. Just a few days. Until what? She snapped. Until we're your nurses? Until you start guilt-tripping us for not bathing you or spoon-feeding you. Kelsey, my mother warned, not because she was offended, just embarrassed by the volume. Kelsey turned to her, eyes wide. Don't Kelsey me. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. We're not signing up to take care of a disabled person. We have lives. She said disabled like it was a dirty word. Like I'd chosen it. The words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were loud, but because they were true. Not in fact, but in belief. That's how she saw me. That's how they all did. A burden wrapped in bandages. My father cleared his throat. It's a lot to ask, Elle. I'm your daughter, I whispered. You're an adult, Kelsey said, tossing a napkin onto the table like a mic drop. Be one. I looked at my mother. No argument. No outrage. Just tight lips and averted eyes. And I got it. I saw it clearly. My presence was an inconvenience. My pain was disruptive. My survival embarrassing. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood slowly, carefully, and reached for my cane. Kelsey rolled her eyes as I stepped away. Seriously? You're just going to leave? I paused beside the booth and met her eyes. I didn't survive a fire to stay somewhere I'm not wanted. And I walked out. The cane tapped softly against the sidewalk, each step like punctuation. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just final. A cold breeze hit my skin as I reached the corner, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. They didn't say my name. Didn't follow. Didn't stop me. And that, more than any insult, told me everything I needed to know. I didn't know where else to go. By the time I reached the hospital's front desk, the sky had cracked open with rain. I must have looked like a ghost, soaked, hunched, half-broken. The receptionist blinked at me before recognition softened her face. "Ellie," she said gently. "You came back." I nodded, unable to form words. My lips were trembling too hard. 5 minutes later, Daphne appeared like she'd been summoned by my heartbeat. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, wrapping her arms around me without hesitation. I stiffened, then sank into it. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed a hug until it happened. She didn't ask questions, didn't press. Just guided me through the sliding doors and back toward the familiar corridors, where antiseptic clung to the air and wheels squeaked on linoleum. "You're not going back to that house," she said under her breath. "Not if I have anything to say about it." The recovery wing had a spare room. It had once been used for overnight shifts, but had sat mostly unused. Daphne led me there, flicked on the soft yellow lamp, and pulled back the quilt someone had left neatly folded at the end of the bed. "Temporary home," she said, smiling. "For someone who deserves better." I stared at the bed. At the table beside it, already holding a tissue box and a small potted succulent labeled, "Grow through what you go through." My legs gave out. I sat down and cried for the first time since I left my parents' booth at the diner. Not quietly. Not politely. Just fully. Anna shuffled in with Curtis a few hours later. "Well, look who couldn't stay away," Anna said, her voice full of mock judgment, but her eyes brimming with kindness. Curtis handed me a folded napkin. Inside it? A still-warm chocolate chip cookie. "Stole it from the cafeteria." Anna leaned her cane against the wall and placed a tiny battery-operated candle on my nightstand. "You need ambience." I laughed. Actually laughed. It hurt a little, but it was real. Within a day, the room transformed. Someone taped up a "Welcome Back, Ellie" sign. Curtis strung fairy lights along the curtain rod. Daphne brought a lavender pillow from the staff lounge. They turned that room into something sacred, not because it was beautiful, but because it held people who chose me. That night, I fell asleep under soft light and real comfort. But morning came with its own kind of cold. The knock at the door was light but firm. "Ellie?" The social worker stepped in, clipboard tucked under one arm. Her smile was cautious. "Can we talk for a moment?" My stomach clenched. "I'm so glad you're safe," she began, perching on the edge of the chair across from me. "And I want to make sure we can support your continued healing." There it was. That phrase. Support your continued healing. The same way someone says, "We regret to inform you." She continued, voice low. "We've looked into your insurance coverage. It'll cover another 13 days. After that, we'll need to discuss next steps." I blinked. Next steps sounded dangerously like, "You need to leave." She softened. "We'll help however we can. Resources, referrals, financial aid. But long-term inpatient care, it's tricky when there's no active medical emergency." 13 days, I repeated, almost to myself. 13 days until I had to figure out where to go again. I nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me." She left me with a brochure I didn't read. Curtis found me staring at the wall an hour later and didn't ask anything. Just sat down on the bed and passed me a second stolen cookie. "Whatever happens," he said, "you're not doing it alone." And for now, that had to be enough. The knock on the door came mid-afternoon. I was curled up in the armchair by the window, a blanket wrapped around my legs, sipping tepid tea that had long since stopped being comforting. Daphne peeked in with a crooked grin. "Ellie? You've got visitors." My stomach sank. "I didn't tell anyone," she winked. "I don't think it was you who did the telling." Before I could ask, she stepped aside, and 3 very familiar faces filled the doorway. I blinked. "Surprise?" said the tallest one, Claire, My middle school best friend who used to braid my hair before every band concert. She looked exactly the same, just with better eyebrows and a wedding ring. Behind her was Josh, my high school lab partner and accidental prom date, and Talia, who'd once given me my first real haircut in her parents' garage while we sang along to Alanis Morissette at full volume. They were holding balloons and a tray of homemade cookies. "Don't freak out," Talia said, raising her hands like I might scream. "We saw your photo online. Someone at the hospital posted a shout-out about your courage." And I was like, that's Ellie Green, who survived Mrs. Mulligan's 9th grade algebra and a fire, Josh added with a grin. I laughed. Actually laughed. They filed in like they belonged, placing balloons by the bed and pulling up chairs like we were in someone's living room instead of a hospital wing. "God, you haven't changed a bit," Claire said, settling beside me and taking my hand. "Except, the burns and all." Her face turned horrified. "That came out wrong." "No," I chuckled, squeezing her hand. "It was perfect." We talked for hours. About the time we skipped school and got caught at a bowling alley. About my short-lived college band. About the night Talia dyed my hair blue and I ended up looking like a Smith. They remembered everything. Things I had shelved. Versions of myself I thought had died. "You were always the glue," Josh said at one point. We just lost track. Life got noisy. "It's not your fault," I said honestly. But still, they were here now. That mattered. By the time the sun dipped below the hospital roofline, the tray of cookies was empty and the balloons were tangled in the curtain rod. My face hurt from smiling. Then Claire leaned in, her tone quieter. "We were thinking, you can't stay here forever. And clearly your family's not stepping up." I nodded slowly. "So," she continued, "Josh's cousin owns a rental building downtown. Walk up, no stairs. First floor unit just opened. No lease yet," Josh added quickly. "We already called." Talia grinned. "We'll help you move in. Furnish it. Whatever you need." I stared at them. These weren't pity offers. Their faces were too honest. Too present. "You're serious," I said, voice cracking. Claire nodded. "Completely." Tears burned, but they were different this time, warmer. Less bitter. Like thawing after a very long winter. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Start with yes," Josh said. And I did. That night, alone in the recovery room, I turned off the lights and let the glow of the fairy lights Curtis had strung up bathe the walls in soft pink and gold. Outside the window, the stars were out. Inside me, something stirred. Something like a heartbeat. Or a beginning. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt remembered. And that, I thought, might be enough to rebuild a life on. The call came just after breakfast. I was sitting cross-legged on my hospital bed, watching a pigeon pace the ledge outside my window like it was waiting for permission to fly. My phone buzzed against the tray table, and the name that lit up the screen stopped me cold. "Dad." My thumb hovered. I almost silenced it. But I didn't. "Hello?" His voice was quieter than usual. Not bored. Not dismissive. Just aged. "Ellie. It's your grandfather. He's not doing well." I didn't say anything. "He's been asking for you," my father added after a beat. "By name." Repeatedly. The lump that formed in my throat was immediate and sharp. My grandfather, Walter Green, had always been the quiet one in the family. A gentle presence. Never loud, but never cruel. He had built the garden behind his house by hand. Let me dig in the dirt with a spoon when I was 4. Told me stories about stars and war and things I was too young to understand. And then somewhere along the way, the visits just stopped. Not because of him, but because my parents stopped bringing me. He must be in his 90s now. "How bad is it?" I asked. "They think a week. Maybe less." I exhaled slowly. "Why me?" Dad hesitated. "I think maybe he knows something's off. With the family. With how things have been." That startled me. He said, "Where's my Ellie? I haven't seen her since she was little. She's the only one who listened." My chest pulled tight. Dad cleared his throat. "He's at the house. Hospice is set up in his room. If you want to come." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't apologize. But he didn't not care either. After I hung up, I sat still for a long time. The decision felt heavier than it should have. I'd already walked away from that house once. But Grandpa wasn't them. He was tomatoes in the backyard. He was stories told in a creaky rocker. He was calloused hands passing me peppermint candies on Sunday afternoons. He had nothing to do with the fire. Or the milkshake. Just memories. And maybe a quiet, final gift. So I said yes. Daphne insisted on driving me. She didn't ask questions. Just helped me dress in soft clothes that didn't cling to my healing skin and packed a sandwich for the road, just in case. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Shrunk by time, or maybe by truth. Inside, everything was still. The lights dim. The air tinged with lavender and loss. My father greeted me at the door with a nod, not a hug. He's been sleeping a lot, he said quietly. But when he's awake, he asks if you're here. I walked down the hallway like I was stepping into a dream I forgot I had. Grandpa's room was warm, the blinds half drawn. Machines beeped softly. A nurse sat in the corner, charting something with tired eyes. And there he was. Walter Green. Smaller now. Fragile. But unmistakably him. His silver hair curled over his forehead. His breathing shallow. His hands, those same gardening hands, rested on top of the blanket, liver spotted and unmoving. I stood there for a moment, afraid to break the silence. Then his eyelids fluttered. And his voice, raspy but clear, whispered, "Ellie." I stepped forward, eyes burning. "Hi, Grandpa." He smiled. Weak but unmistakable. "You came." "Of course I did." He motioned slightly with his fingers. I reached for his hand, careful not to press too hard. "You're taller," he murmured. I laughed softly. "It's been a few years." His eyes blinked slowly, focusing. "They didn't tell me. About the fire. About you." I swallowed the lump. "They never came." His jaw clenched. "I would've," he said. "If I'd known." And I believed him. Because with Grandpa, silence had never meant cruelty. Just age. Distance. Not malice. "I'm okay now," I told him. "Better than before, actually." He nodded once. Then closed his eyes, resting. For a moment, the machines were the only sound in the room. Then he whispered again, "You were always meant for more than they gave you." And I held his hand, even as the machines beeped on and the day drifted quietly by. I wasn't planning to say anything more. I thought holding his hand would be enough. Letting him drift in and out of sleep, whispering soft things from a shared memory bank, gardens, peppermints, stories about stars. But when his eyes opened again and landed on my hands, everything changed. He reached for them slowly, his fingers brushing the bandages, the puckered edges of healing skin. "What happened to you?" His voice wasn't weak this time. It was anchored. Present. I hesitated. Then, because lying to him would have been a final cruelty, I told the truth. Piece by piece. About the night of the gas leak. The call my parents didn't answer. The fire. The ambulance. Waking up alone in a hospital room, no visitors. The surgeries. The healing. The silence. I spoke slowly, voice shaking, but this time I didn't stop. I let it all out. I told him how Kelsey slammed her milkshake down and called me a burden. I told him how they didn't even let me stay 2 nights. I told him about the hospital staff, the room they made for me, the people who chose me even when blood didn't bind us. His hands tightened around mine. When I finally looked up, his face had changed. Gone was the gentle softness. In its place was something hard. Furious. "They what?" he rasped. "They didn't tell you," I whispered. "I thought maybe you knew and just, no." His voice shook. "They kept this from me. All of it." He looked toward the hallway like he could still hear them, his son, his daughter-in-law, his granddaughter Kelsey, walking around like nothing was wrong. "I asked where you were," he muttered, eyes blazing. "They told me you were busy. Living out of state. Said you'd drifted." I shook my head, tears gathering fast. I never drifted. I was just dismissed. He sat up straighter than I thought possible. Rage, apparently, had a way of clearing the lungs. "They've been circling like vultures," he said, voice rising. talking about what goes to whom. The house. The stocks. My war medals. My jaw tightened. I don't want any of that, I whispered. But you should, he shot back. You earned it. You held my hand when you were 4 and asked if heaven had tomatoes. You sat with me in the garden while everyone else was inside pretending I was deaf and senile. I tried to protest again, but he shook his head. I don't care if it's a day early or a year late, I see clearly now. Then, with unexpected strength, he turned to the nurse and rasped, "Call Barry." The nurse blinked. "Sir?" "My lawyer," he growled. "Call Barry. Tell him I want him here today. Not next week. Not after lunch. Now." Her eyes widened. "Of course. Right away." I sat in stunned silence. "You don't have to do this," I said, voice small. He turned to me, eyes suddenly soft again. "Ellie, the things I planted in that garden? They weren't just vegetables. I was planting legacy, hoping someone would keep something alive after me." He exhaled shakily. "Turns out, it was never them. It was always you." Barry arrived an hour later. An old man with a leather briefcase and coffee breath. He looked startled to find Walter Green sitting up with fire in his veins. "What are we doing?" Barry asked cautiously, pulling out papers. "A new will," Grandpa said. My father knocked on the door just as Barry uncapped his pen. "I heard Barry's here," Dad said lightly. "Thought I'd join the conversation." Grandpa didn't even look at him. "No need," he said sharply. "You've had your turn." The door closed quietly behind him. Barry adjusted his glasses and nodded. "Let's begin." And just like that, with ink and intention, the shape of my future changed. Not because I asked for it, but because, for the first time, someone in my family chose me not out of guilt, but out of truth. He made me promise to come back the next morning. Not out of obligation, he said, but because he wanted to hear one more story about the garden. The one with the caterpillar we tried to keep as a pet. We named it Max. It didn't live long, but the memory did. I returned just after sunrise. The house was still quiet. My parents had left in a flurry of confusion and thinly veiled anger after Barry packed up his files the night before. Kelsey hadn't shown up at all. I knocked softly and stepped into Grandpa's room, half afraid of what I might find. But he was still there. Still breathing. Still him. "Morning, Max," I whispered, pulling the chair up to the bed. He stirred slightly at my voice, eyes fluttering open. "I knew you'd come." We talked for a while, about things that didn't matter. And then about things that did. I told him about my new apartment, how Josh's cousin was holding it for me, and how Claire was already planning a welcome dinner. I told him how the nurses decorated my hospital room, how Anna threatened to paint a mural on the wall if they didn't stop giving her instant coffee. He laughed. Or tried to. And then, he grew quiet. "Ellie," he said, voice thinning. "When they read the will, don't let them make you feel unworthy, or cruel, or selfish." I shook my head. "I don't want revenge." "I know," he whispered. "That's why you deserve everything." His eyes began to close again. "I promised you that house when you were 9, he said. You were sitting on the porch, feet too short for the swing. You looked up at me and said, 'Someday, I want a place that feels safe, all the time.'" "I remember," I said softly. "I didn't forget," he murmured. His fingers twitched in mine, and I held them tighter. And, just like that, no fanfare, no final gasp, he slipped away. Still holding my hand. Still steady. Still loved. The reading of the will happened 5 days later. Barry hosted it in his office, surrounded by shelves of ledgers and musty books. My parents sat stiffly across from him, hands folded. Kelsey arrived late, chewing gum and rolling her eyes before she even sat down. Barry began in his usual slow cadence, reading through formalities, legal phrasing, trusts, and terms. And then, to my granddaughter, Eleanor Green, I leave the home at 17, Bramble Lane. The house we built with patience and seed packets. The one where she listened when no one else did. May she always have a place where she feels rooted. Silence. Then chaos. My father stood up so fast his chair clattered to the floor. "This is absurd." My mother's voice followed. He wasn't well. He was confused. He didn't mean. Barry raised a hand calmly. The new will is signed, notarized, and witnessed. Kelsey scoffed. He gave her the house? Because she cried at his bedside. I looked at her. No, because I was there. Her lips pressed into a thin, furious line. My father tried again. We'll contest this. You're welcome to, Barry said. But it will fail. They all turned to me then, like I was the villain in a play they didn't know they were cast in. But I didn't shrink. I didn't apologize. I just nodded. Because this wasn't revenge. It was recognition. For every moment I went unseen. For every kindness that went unnoticed. For the little girl who once sat on that swing and dreamed of a home that felt safe. Later that day, I walked the path behind the Bramble Lane house alone. The garden was overgrown, but not ruined. Vines curled around rusting trellises. Tomato cages stood crooked, but still hopeful. I knelt by the soil and ran my fingers through it. It was still soft. Still waiting. And so was I. The porch swings still creaked. That was the first thing I noticed when I moved in, how it hadn't been oiled in years, how it groaned in that old familiar rhythm, like the house was sighing with me. It had been 3 months since Grandpa passed. 2 since the will was finalized. And 1 since I officially signed the deed with shaking hands and a smile that cracked wide open when the notary said, "Congratulations, homeowner." Now, the living room was glowing with warm light, smells of spiced cider and vanilla cookies wafting from the kitchen. Fairy lights Curtis insisted on stringing from the ceiling pulsed gently above a growing crowd of laughter and footsteps. "I cannot believe you made a charcuterie board," Anna said, popping a grape in her mouth. "Who even are you?" "A woman with a cutting board and internet access," I replied, grinning. She raised a plastic cup in salute. "Reinvention looks good on you." Daphne stood by the fireplace, chatting with Claire about dahlias. Josh was setting up a tiny speaker near the record shelf, playing a playlist he labeled Ellie's Comeback Mixtape. Even Talia showed up late, dragging in a ficus in a neon pink pot. "You need a plant with drama," she declared, placing it near the window. The house felt alive again. Not with old ghosts, but new breath. I caught myself looking at the walls, at the corners of the room, remembering what this space had been and what it was becoming. The old dining room table now bore a centerpiece of wildflowers and thank you cards. The hallway walls held prints from Curtis's sketchbook and one framed group photo of us in the hospital recovery wing, awkward, scarred, smiling. I still wore my long sleeves most days. Not because I was ashamed, but because the scars sometimes pulled in the cold. I'd learned to listen to my body, and to honor it. Around 9, I tapped a spoon against my cider mug and raised it gently. Everyone quieted. I looked around at this mismatched, imperfect, chosen family. "You all know what this house used to be," I began. "And what I've been through to stand here now." Heads nodded. Some eyes shimmered. "I used to think healing was about getting back to how I was before," I said. "But now I know it's about becoming who I was always meant to be." Curtis let out a quiet, hum, and Anna raised her glass early. I continued. "This home doesn't erase the fire, or the silence, or the years I spent waiting to be seen. But it gives all that pain a purpose." I looked down, then back up. "So tonight, I want to toast, not just to survival, but to transformation." A pause. "To boundaries," I said, lifting my cup higher. "To chosen families." They echoed back, louder now. "And to burning what no longer serves you." The room erupted in clinks and cheers, cider spilling slightly as laughter bubbled through the room like music. Later that night, long after the guests had gone and the fire had burned down to gentle coals, I stepped out into the backyard garden. The trellises stood taller than before. Claire and I had reinforced them together last weekend. New seedlings peeked from freshly turned soil. Tomatoes, basil, bell peppers. I crouched by one small plant with curling leaves and whispered, "You'll like it here. Promise." The stars above were clear, unbothered. I sat on the porch swing one last time before bed, letting it creak beneath me, and thought of Grandpa. Of the promise he kept. And the woman I'd become, scars, soul, and all. Not because they saved me, but because I finally learned how to save myself. Thank you for following Ellie's journey. If you were in her shoes, what would you have done differently? or the same? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.